Today I'm revisiting my Samurai Tau, the Sakura, and creating a multi-part bits pack that you can grab to customize your models. And it's all thanks to today's sponsor, MSI. It's tabletop time! Previously on the channel, I made a custom crisis suit using parts I'd 3D sculpted, but I've developed as a sculptor since then, and it is time to update them, expand them, and make them available to you all. Going back and looking at my previous work has been really fun, but I've definitely learned a lot of new tricks since then. There's some pretty obvious areas that I would like to improve on my parts before moving forward and making them available to everyone. To start with, we have the thigh guards. The previous version didn't fit perfectly and the shape of the panels felt a bit off kilter and flat to me. I'm going to redesign the plates to be larger and follow a curve around the thigh more effectively. By reshaping these segments, I can also bring them closer to the knee and improve the fit onto the leg. The next change I wanted to make was on the pill-like nodes on the armor. Honestly, they look pretty mediocre. So I'm using the new rope-like segments I've used on my previous Sakura armor to add some of that flavor and tie them in with the infantry bits. I ruminated on this for a while, unsure if cloth on a mech would be a strange addition. But ultimately I decided thematically it looked too good to worry about. Rule of cool and all. Also, who's to say this isn't some Tau unobtainium fiber cable rather than rope? A side effect of adding the cable is it gave me license to include the remembrance charms as I had with the infantry. But given that I had more space to work with on these shoulder pads, I could create some really nice bundles tied on with additional rope. For the shoulder pads, I was generally happy with the design, however I needed to change the strange pill-shaped nodes with the new rope. And I also needed to swap the old Sakura Blossom emblem with the new one. I also decided to make a few variants of these shoulder pads that included the tags, and a variant with no emblem, so that anyone could paint their own emblem on if they wished. It's time for me to print these off and see how they've done and then move on with sculpting some other parts. But in the meantime, Murray and Jen have been building a sweet base for this crisis suit.
So Dave has worked really hard to make these custom Sakura bits, and obviously this isn't the first time we've had to 3D print them. We mentioned before in a couple of videos the type of environment that we live in. Not every print is going to come out amazing, sometimes they fail and we need to try again. But like I said, it is super cold where we are right now, so the prints aren't adhering to the bed as well as they usually do. Keep in mind, we also make 2 videos a week, so we really need to make sure that we get these prints on and we get them going. That being said, the support that you guys are showing us has been a huge help and a big motivator to keep doing this type of project. I also just wanted to mention that if you want to get into 3D printing, environment is actually a huge factor and maybe something that you wouldn't originally think about. That's why you can see on some of the prints that I'm currently curing, some of the stuff hasn't adhered to the bed. So either way, I just wanted to share my thoughts on 3D printing and thank everyone so much for all of the support you've been showing us. So now I just need to cure the pits and we can go back to making our model. So the first thing we need to do is build our crisis suit. So let's get him cut out and we can get started. So while Murray was cleaning up all of the parts, I went ahead and began building the base. For the base for the crisis suit, I wanted to incorporate more of a Japanesey feel. Rummaging through Dave's old parts, I found this base that I thought would work perfectly, but it's a little bit too small. So I decided to glue it onto the very edge of the bigger base and build up the sides. Try my best to replicate that Japanese forest vibes where the path may look a little bit unstable and a little bit rocky. I did this by gluing some cork in different shapes and trimming it to the base. Once I was happy with how this was looking, I went ahead and filled it in with some texture paste just to make it look nice and even. So it was all done, I passed it off to Murray where he could start building the crisis suit. What do you think, Dave? I've glued everything together and I think it's looking pretty good.
These prints have come up really well, but developing them has been an iterative process, going back and forth to get the proportions perfect. This recent dive into 3D sculpting, allowing me to expand and reimagine my Sakura Tau, has only been possible thanks to our awesome sponsors, MSI. MSI are one of the biggest supporters of the channel, with their notebooks powering all the work we do at the studio. Today I am using the Prestige Evo 13 with its super lightweight frame coming in at under a kilo. The Prestige 13 is an extremely portable machine for use on the go. As a creator, our jobs are dynamic, requiring us to work at different locations, move around between studios, and sometimes work remotely. So having a reliable, portable notebook is a must. Being able to take my work with me down into the studio and conferring with Murray and Jenn on my designs has been vital to making this project possible. And with the Prestige 13 Evo's Wi-Fi 6E and Thunderbolt 4 connectivity, I've had lightning speed no matter where I'm working. The Evo 13 also boasts enterprise-grade security with fingerprint sensor and face recognition to ensure nobody can sneak a peek at your work before it's ready. Prestige Evo 13 also has a 13th generation Intel i7 processor, with its integrated graphics more than capable of handling my 3D modeling and rendering needs. While its 16:10 golden ratio display ensures I have a comfortable viewing experience while I work long hours at the computer. Now I have a few changes I need to make to these files. I'm going to modify the helmet to be Mark II with a couple of variations and some changes in proportion. I also really want to make a sweet missile launcher to punch in on that anime missile circus vibe. Follow the link in our description to see how our awesome partners MSI and their notebooks could help improve your creator workflow. But as for me, with parts printing, it's time to make some brand new bits, and I could use a change of scenery. With the core parts of the mech looking great, I needed to update the helmet to match. This meant changing the pills to a rope, rotating the side armor panels to make them more prevalent, and also giving it a little more neck room for posability. So not every mech would end up looking the same. I also decided to do a second variant, changing the nodes on the end of the antennae. I also swapped out the emblem as I had on the previous components. With the updating of the old parts done, it was time to make something brand new. The first thing I wanted to make was a missile launcher. I'm always a fan of missile pods in movies and anime, and dozens of missiles firing out on plumes is always a good look. I decided on a 3-tubed launcher, but for a point of difference, I wanted to sculpt some doors on the tubes that could open and close. By creating these doors, it allows for some nice variation for multiple launchers in a way that makes sense, as having multiple designs for the same weapon feels a bit strange for a sci-fi space military. With these sculpted, I posed a few launchers in various states, with all the doors shut, with all the doors open, and in between. To allow for more posing, I created a disc mount so you could use this launcher on pretty much anything you wanted, and giving it a full range of rotation on one axis. But a missile launcher is no fun without an actual missile launching. To do this, I moved over to the sculpting tool, creating a plume of smoke jetting out the back of a small rocket. I worked from a sphere, ballooning out the mesh bit by bit until I was happy with the organic nature of the plume. I also created a bit of a backblast of smoke, pluming out of the back of the launcher to complete the effect. I'm really happy with this launcher, and I think it's going to make a great addition to my Sakura mechs. But the real test will be to see if it prints. I've got a bunch of printer work to do getting these files ready for print, so why don't we check in on Jenn to see how she's going painting the mech.
Painting, which is one of the most exciting parts of this project. But first, we've got to prime in and spray on some of those greys. So let's get out the airbrush and get started. So the first thing we needed to do was lay down that black primer, and then we could spray our greys on top. Once this is all dry, we could go in and start layer painting. This time around, I decided to start off with the metallics, going around and making sure each of those pieces was covered evenly. The crisis suit has a few different little bits and bobs on them, so I was careful enough to make sure I got each and every one of them. I also had Dave's previous crisis suit as a little paint reference for me, which was super handy. Once the metallics were all done, I moved on to the brown pin wash. This time I wanted to do a couple of layers just to really add that depth and contrast. I went ahead and moved on to the undersuit, or the black parts on the model. I painted these up and also gave them a line highlight of a darker grey. Moving on to the armor, I needed to do some panel lighting using some greys and some whites for that really crispy edge. Crisis suits in particular seem to be very geometric in shape, which means they have a lot of edges to go over. So I tried to be nice and careful to make sure I made those edges nice and crispy. And for that final touch, I needed to add in that iconic Sakura pink. And I added this onto the rope details and the emblem on the shoulder pads. So I'm just about finished here, so let's see if Dave's got the last parts for this model.
With the crisis suit coming along well, I've got just a few additions to make to really get this to feel like the mech of my dreams. We don't often associate samurai with shields, we do often associate mechs with shields. From Gundam to Evangelion to Front Mission, classic mecha are often depicted with big blast shields for combat. The Tau, however, are more delicate than that, So instead, I wanted to design an energy shield generator that captured the elegant side of the Sakura. To do this, I decided to create a shield generator in the shape of a single Sakura flower, focusing on an enlarged center with projector panels merely hinting at petals. With the shield designed, the final component to make was a nice banner that would fit on the back or shoulder of any mechs you would like to create. I'd grabbed my banners that I'd made for my samurai infantry and tweaked the proportions. With mechas often having jetpacks and large bulky shoulders, I didn't want an excess of fabric, but I did want the flowing in the wind vibe that looks so good on artwork. To do this, I decided to use a few strands of cloth rather than one singular large banner, with a more aggressive back sweep to the overall design. I used Blender's physics sims to simulate fabric and make sure that all of my elements were flowing correctly from the same wind source. This really ties them all together and gives an amazing sense of momentum to the piece. Overall, I think these would look awesome on top of our new Battlesuit, but there's only one way to find out, and that's by printing them out. Murray and Jen have headed off for the day, so after I print these, I'm gonna go paint them myself and see how they look on our crisis suit. So it came time to paint the final parts that I'd printed, and I was really happy to see how they'd come up. We literally divided and conquered, with each of us, Murray, Jen, and myself, painting different elements. For my part, I painted the Sakura shield. I had two designs, which I will be putting in the bits pack. You can choose for yourself which one you like. I went for the one with the petals of the shield flowing backwards, and then I also painted up the helmet. And I'm really happy with my little adjustments to these. In particular, the Sakura emblem comes up really nicely.
I joined in some of the painting, and one of the parts I did was the missile pod firing a missile. So I did a fun little effect painting the leading trail of the plume up to a nice white, which would give me a nice basis for a blue contrast. It'll give a really vibrant punch, and towards the end of the trail, I want it to be a lot more dark and smoky. So I'm going to sequentially highlight using darker colors, which is a bit backwards, but makes more sense realistically.
And as a final touch, Jen painted the base, putting on the traditional Sakura blossom, Sakura flowers, as well as some nice snow. The base also had some detailing in the form of one of these little traditional lanterns, which Jen painted a nice red. And with all of those components finished, it's time for a suitably mecha anime robot assembly montage, and then we can check out the reveals. Now as we stare at this samurai mech and enjoy its glorious 3D printed components, I would like to give a big thank you to all of our amazing patrons for supporting the work we do here on the channel. If you'd like to consider supporting us, the links are also in the description. We make 2 videos a week of free entertainment for you all, and if you would like to support us and help us get that done and keep doing this as a job, consider signing up to our Patreon. It is the most direct way to help out the channel. I'm so happy with how my Sakura suit mech bits came out, and if you'd like to get your hands on them, head on over to the Tabletop Time website. They're available right now for 10% off for 1 week only. And a big thank you to MSI for sponsoring the video. We hope you've enjoyed the journey, and like and subscribe. Murray? Oh, I thought we were doing a Penn and Teller bit for a minute there.
We kind of were, I don't know.